Hello there, friends. Welcome to BJJ Meditations. This is BJJ Meditations, episode number 54. I'm your host, Joe Hannon. This is a different type of format episode. It's a collaboration episode with the guys from 1-800-BJJ-Help. That's Josh Alou and Jake Luigi of Less Impressed, More Involved BJJ and the Outlier community. Two amazing digital information streams that I highly recommend that you check out, in addition to a fantastic podcast. Great guys, had an amazing conversation. It was refreshing to be on the receiving end of an interview for a change. Usually I'm the one giving them as a journalist, or as I sit here kind of like opining in front of the microphone for you. So it was good to just kind of take a step back, relax, and answer the questions that these guys had, which I thought were incredibly thoughtful. Looking forward to doing some future work with them. We already have an episode on bow hunting and jiu-jitsu kind of in the works. I didn't realize that both of them are bow hunters, so that's really cool. Looking to explore the thematic overlap with them at some point in the near future. But yeah, without further ado, here is Josh and Jake of 1-800-BJJ-Help. Hey, this is Joe.
Hey Joe, this is Josh. Nice to meet you. I'm calling from 1-800-BJJ-Help. How's it going?
It's going well. It's a beautiful evening here on the East Coast. My
Awesome.
son's sleeping about 30 feet behind me here, so hopefully I don't wake him up.
Yeah, hopefully we don't get too excited. But we've also got Jake on the line. We've got three different time zones going. So yeah, it'll be three of us today with lots of questions for you. So pretty excited to have you.
Hopefully I can answer them. I don't pretend to have a lot of really good answers, but hopefully I can raise some good counter questions.
Super excited either way. I think it'll be a good one. First thing I want to start with is an idea I brought over to Jake. I heard you guys at Princeton BJJ do BJJ labs, and Jake, maybe you
Yeah.
want to talk a little bit about your experiments and what your thoughts are.
Yeah. So yeah, basically, Josh was doing a bunch of research on you, and brought this idea to me. And I'm kind of in a situation where, like, if I have something I want to experiment with, I can like learn about it on Monday and implement it on Tuesday if I wanted to. So that's kind of what I did. And from what it sounded like yours are more like mandatory, in the sense that like you have to bring something in if you want to attend that class. And for me, I kind of took a different approach, and I basically just said, like, if you're planning on coming to class tonight, this is the type of class it is. And I don't know, I've kind of had a bit of mixed results. Like, I really like it because I don't have to like teach that class. And like, not all the weight of like having all the answers falls on me. And like, people come and, bring different positions and have like studied something. So it's like, they're sharp in that area. But then like other people don't. So yeah, I don't know if it's just like the way I structured it. But yeah, I guess a more generic question would be like, would you mind kind of describing the BJJ lab, the way it's structured for your school, and kind of the pros and cons you see to like the way it's structured?
Yeah, sure. So it's a 1 hour session, and the prerequisite is that you need to come with something in mind that you're working on. And it could be anything. It could be something that's being covered in the curriculum that month, or usually we're doing our curriculum in like 2-week sprints now. So it can be something taken right from class that you want to sharpen up. It could be something totally far afield that you're just curious about. But the idea here is that we want students to be taking ownership of the learning process in some capacity. And you rep that however you want for usually about 45, 50 minutes. And then the last 10, 15 minutes of class, we'll just troubleshoot things as a group. And that's kind of where like the real interesting stuff will happen, because you get insights based on experience or based on body type that you might not get if you were just studying alone in a vacuum, or if you were just working alone one-on-one with the same person the entire duration. But sort of like zooming out and taking like a more meta view, really what kind of inspired me to push this was that these two really awesome students. One of them's our head instructor, Shane McCarthy, and the other one is this guy, Colin, who's just a really hardcore grappler, has had tremendous results just from his dedication to deliberate practice within the art. And during the pandemic, they kind of teamed up and were training with each other. And our school was closed and there was no curriculum. It was kind of like a self-guided learning experience. And I just saw how these guys took off because they took ownership of their jujitsu. So I got to thinking like, okay, how can we kind of build that into the structure and the curriculum of the school? And this was the answer. Now, like it's still something I'm tinkering with, especially incorporating feedback with this really awesome dude, Kevin, trains at our school. He's a brown belt. He's formerly from academia, sort of like a recovering academic, but he has a lot of thoughts on how people learn and bringing in his experience from academia. And we're tinkering with potentially shifting the BJJ lab to focus on singular problems, so it's more of like a team learning experience. And that could be something that we do for like a sprint and then open it back up. It could be something that we try for a little while and it doesn't work and we stop doing it. But really the idea here is that you need to take ownership of your learning. And my hypothesis is that it can start at lower levels than we think historically. Like if you look at the evolution of jiu-jitsu instruction, I mean, we're kind of like in the Stone Age compared to like how other practices and pursuits teach what they do. So the advantage of that is like we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can just kind of like borrow from other disciplines and see what works. But the thinking historically was that like bow to your sensei, he or she, usually he, let's be honest, like, it's the world we came from. Like things are very different now. Emily Kwok is my head coach. So like I say that with some context there, but like we come from this traditionally male dominated hierarchical world of martial arts. Right. And like things are getting flatter. The internet democratized the spread of information. Like you have these YouTube brown belt or YouTube blue belts and purple belts who have gone out and so crowdsourced all their education. Like we have to realize that that's a thing and respond accordingly. So how can we provide within the school the context and the expertise that comes from an upper belt, that comes from experience, that comes from the more seasoned instructor with this democratization of information flow? And that's kind of like the big why of why we're doing this. We're doing this because the evolution of the art is so rapid and the amount of information is so vast that you could make the argument that like it's just as important to teach people the ability to think critically about jujitsu as it is to like teach them jujitsu. Like I always say, jujitsu is not like a service rendered. It's like it's a participatory effort. How can we make better participants in the art? This is how, I think. We'll see. Ask me in 5 years, I might have a totally different opinion, but that's kind of where my head's at the moment.
Yeah, we're definitely all still trying to figure it out for sure. But like just to kind of like piggyback on your point, like I have some people that have been coming to jiu-jitsu for like 2 weeks and they come to a class like this, and oftentimes like normally I just set the timer for 15 minutes and like we just go around because we only have like 4 people and like each person gets 15 minutes and we do whatever they want to do for 15 minutes. Yeah. And sometimes like the people who have been there for 2 weeks ask some very good questions. They're like, I'm running into this problem. I'm not sure how to solve it. And it like, I find that is exactly like you're describing, and they're becoming problem solvers that are involved in their like learning. And then like other people that are more advanced, I think like they tend to come just like regurgitate some like Danaher instructional that they were watching and then like just drill it, but yeah, I find that some of the new people, they you can tell they're thinking, and just the fact that they like have to come up with a question, I think is very good.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
And Joe, you mentioned some things are stuck in the Stone Age. What do you think are some of the most common ways we're teaching jujitsu that is outdated and we should move on from?
Well, I think so. Like, I think that technique gets a bad rep because if you're taking a truly principled approach to learning in jiu-jitsu, you could focus on a technique and pull it apart and look at all the principles that make it work, and then take a more principled learning arc from there. But I think like when I first started training, this wasn't that long ago, class was like a 10 to 15 minute warm up. And then it was some iteration of like this, like my very first class was like the cross collar choke. So I'm going to practice the cross collar choke for like anywhere from 15 to 35 minutes. And then, okay, we're going to roll. And I rolled that first day. And guess what I tried to do? I tried the cross collar choke everybody. And I did that, proceeded to do that for, I don't know, 3 months before I learned a new trick or whatever. Um, so, I think that we certainly do oversteer or have oversteered in the past in emphasizing technique. But at the same time, you can go too wide on principle as well. Like, there's a very good reason why most schools won't lead an introductory class with something like open guard, because like, what is open guard? It's this amorphous kind of thing. It can take all these different shapes. You can use all these different tactics in it. Like, it's too unstructured. So I think that historically we've been sort of too tethered to technique, but I almost wonder sometimes if like we're going too far afield. Like, I know this is kind of an ongoing debate we have among the instructors in the school. Like, for example, is there such a thing as fundamental jujitsu and intermediate jujitsu and advanced jujitsu, or is it just jujitsu? Should we be delineating these things? In a perfect world, maybe not. But the fact of the matter is, we tend to learn by chunking things down. So I'm constantly, as an instructor, trying to strike the perfect balance, and perfect is obviously impossible, but a more perfect balance between high and low resolution depiction of whatever it is I'm trying to show.
Right. What are the different sides of that debate of, is there a basic, intermediate, advanced, or fundamental and advanced version of jiu-jitsu?
Yeah. I suppose like the no delineation argument is, you're kind of like forcing me to steel man this here. The no delineation argument, the no differentiation argument is that the underlying principles of the system work regardless of where you're at. So like, if you can master the principles, you're going to be able to execute these things on whatever level you want. But I think the counter argument to that is just pure complexity. Like, you're not going to learn calculus before you learn pre-algebra, or before you learn how to count. Like it's very, very difficult to entertain the complexity. Like, maybe I'm just stupid, but I vividly remember the point in time in my white belt where I realized the positional hierarchy. Like, nobody explicitly said to me like, yeah, mount is better than side control for this reason. Like, I had to go out and find like the Steph casting chart that like broke all that down. It was just opaque to me. Like, I just didn't know. No one ever explicitly said to me like, yeah, mount is the best position because of X, Y, and Z, or back control is better than mount, or is rather better than side control for X, Y, Z. We just take a lot for granted, and I'm constantly like trying to check my blind spots and like realize what I'm taking for granted, realize like the obvious thing that isn't so obvious. But like, it's damn hard when you've been doing this for a long time. And I just think that when you go too far to like the no delineation side of things, you run the risk of missing a lot of those blind spots.
Right.
Yeah,
That's
we were just talking. Sorry, yeah.
No, go ahead.
We were just talking before this. Like, it's like when a new person comes in and you've been doing this for so long, like sometimes you forget that when you say like, hey, go sit on top of that person, like that is weird. It's weird. And like, I forget to say sometimes, like, when you're getting like, when you want them to let go, you tap. Like, it's like just some stuff that you just like don't even think about explaining to people. It's tough.
I had this situation. We had like a big snow and ice storm a couple weeks back, and I was getting ready to go teach my Saturday class, and I walked out to my car and just like totally wiped out on my ass. And like, it was like comedic. I went back and watched the ring camera footage, and I realized that like I did a break fall and my head never hit the ground. And like, I did the whole like striking the mat thing. I had a small bruise on my arm, and I got back up off the ground, laughed, and I went and taught my class. And I was thinking on the drive over, like, wow, what a radically different outcome if I just didn't know how to fall. And it wasn't like I was cognitively thinking like, okay, I'm going to do my break fall now. it was just so hardwired into me from doing it over and over and over again. And I'm like, man, when was the last time we did break falls? Like, I should probably just make sure, it's like a mixed level class on Saturday. Usually it tends to be like more blue belts, purple belts, some brown belts. But like, when was the last time I checked everybody's break fall out? Am I just taking for granted that these people in this mixed level class like all know how to break fall? Do I really know that they all know how to break fall? And I didn't. It was a good thing I checked. And that's what happens when you get kind of too far afield and you focus more on conceptual learning and on principle based learning. And like, yeah, you still need to learn how to fall down. Like, whether it's a self-defense scenario or whether it's just like you're practicing the hip toss, like you need to know how to fall down, and there's just no way to get around technical instruction with that.
Right. It's really interesting to hear you on your podcast and just talk about the learning process and the culture at Princeton BJJ. I'm curious, what are some well, I guess when you first started working with Emily or with Josh Waitskin, what do you think were some of the big shifts that they influenced in your thinking and in your way of teaching, and especially in terms of the greater culture at Princeton BJJ?
Yeah, so I've only really been teaching. I'm still very much like a novice instructor. I've been teaching, I guess, for like 3 years now. But as far as how Emily and Josh have influenced my approach to teaching, or just in general, like my approach to jujitsu, it's just brought a lot more openness and receptivity to the entire process. And that can be like to feedback or to just reading the room, reading and trying to figure out like, what do the students need? It's much more a listening act than it is a telling act, I suppose, is the more succinct way of saying it. And that's come directly from them, is to just like kind of embrace that stillness and really listen and see what people need, and then give the minimum effective dose, And also what we talked about with the BJJ lab is that ultimately I believe that it could be jujitsu, it could be writing, it could be art. It doesn't really matter. Like, all of these arts are relational in nature. Like, you're sort of the personal locus point by which you're going to navigate it. So you need to find your way through it. I can't, like, I suppose I could have my own school and just make carbon copies of my jujitsu, but like, my jujitsu is mediocre at best. So like, I don't know if that's going to do anyone any favors. To me, as an instructor and sort of absorbing this from Josh and Emily, is to make people kind of deeply root into who they are, so that way they can find their own way through jujitsu or through anything. It doesn't really matter. Jujitsu is just kind of like a convenient way of training this.
Yeah, I love that expression Josh would say about mastery being unobstructed self-expression.
Yeah.
Yeah, where along, I'm still really early in my jujitsu journey. I'm like a year and a half in. But I feel like I can already sense some of my personality come out in the way I rock climb, in the way I've played chess in the past, and the way I've shot archery, just a little bit, maybe overthinking, a little timid. That's kind of how I how I play. Uh, did When did that, I guess, deeply personal part of jujitsu come in your journey, and what did you learn about yourself along the way?
Yeah. So I don't really know if I'm operating with unobstructed self-expression. I think like I get moments of it, like true virtuosity. I think you could spend a whole lifetime pursuing that. And maybe even the greatest ones, like, they only get moments of it. But in terms of when I started to feel more, let's say like flow states in my rolling, it really started to happen around purple belt. And like, if you ask Emily, she'll tell you she remembers a specific moment and a specific conversation where like I just let go. It was really just, it wasn't like any conscious decision to do anything. It was really like a decision to just stop trying, to just let things unfold. And like, how I don't know if you guys curse on your podcast, but like, I'm from New Jersey, so I can't help myself. It's like, how the fuck do you tell somebody to do that? Like, it really just comes from a deep relaxation into like who you are and what you're about, and just being like, this is it. Like, what you see is what you get here. And I think that's like so much bigger than jujitsu. And I think really that's why so many people are attracted to jujitsu in the first place, is because we are really talking about much larger concepts. It just gives you a venue to train them. And that sort of radical self-acceptance that I'm talking about, like that can happen in jujitsu. For me, it happened around purple belt. And that's really where things like started to loosen up. And that's when it really like I could feel things starting to flow. And I could execute on things like I never thought I was capable of. Like I've never really been a gifted athlete. I've always been somebody, I'm a grinder. Like that's my nature. I'm just going to put my head down and keep going. But for around purple belt, like that was when I was like, whoa, like I didn't really know I could do this kind of stuff, And I
Yeah.
really think it was just because I finally was relaxed. I finally could let go.
Yeah, it's such hard advice to follow to hear someone say relax and let go. I'm like, oh, but how? How do I do that? Do you have any advice on how people get to maybe one, get to know themselves more deeply, and then two, get to express more truthfully, if that's the right word?
Yes. So like, we're in Princeton. So we deal with a lot of very cerebral, intellectual, logical, analytical type people. And jujitsu, you can certainly learn through analysis. You can certainly put all of those skills to good work in learning it, and deconstructing it and in teaching it. Like there are times when I think I don't think critically enough about this stuff. But it's also just it's like a dance. You can stand there and count the beats in your head and think like, okay, on the 4, every time I'm gonna move my left foot on a 45-degree angle. Or you can kind of just feel the rhythm and move along with it. And I think that jujitsu kind of has a way of breaking people who are extremely analytical and cerebral out of that frame of mind, experiencing the other side of it. And then with enough repetition, like those two hemispheres of the brain start to get to like bridged a little bit different, like it really does like change how you're wired. So as far as advice is what I would give people, and what I've given people like in my consulting work, is to just truly feel. Like I really believe that a mindfulness practice is one of the best companions you can have to a jujitsu practice, to a movement practice, which is jujitsu is movement practice, because it really teaches you to just be present to the physical sensations and the emotional sensations that are accompanying your movement practice and accompanying your day-to-day life. And like once you build that muscle of simply feeling and not responding, that's when you can really start to kind of loosen up a bit. So that's like one tactical thing I would give somebody, where instead of just like telling them to try to relax, like, no, I'm not even going to tell you to try to relax. I really just want you to feel how fucking tense you are. Like
Right.
this is not trying to, we're not going to sit here and try and change your state. I really want you to feel what is actually going on here. I'm sure you guys
Yeah.
have both had that experience where you just like grip up with somebody and they're just radiating tension, and they don't even, especially they're a newer student, like they don't even realize how tense they are. Yeah. That's what
Yeah.
we're going for here, is getting them to realize that on their own.
Right, that's probably me. And it goes back to your point of, as you've developed as a teacher, realizing it's about the listening. And I was hoping
Totally.
we would talk about mindfulness. It's a big passion of mine. When did you start your mindfulness practice? I feel like athletes emit, we very high energy, we enjoy doing things. Like it's can sometimes be a hard sell to get someone to sit down and pay attention to what's going on. When
Yeah.
did you
Very
start? And
difficult.
then what was the first benefit that you noticed from it?
So I had the benefit of, in college, there was this literature professor by the name of Jess Rowe. He's written some really good novels. One of them's called Your Face and Mine. I have it here behind me. Um, he led a zazen meditation session like every week. I want to say it was like on Wednesday afternoons or something like that. And I went knowing absolutely nothing about it. And this was very like traditional Japanese Zen meditation, where like, the mudra you're holding and with your thumbs needed to be like just so, and your posture needed to be just so. And it was a little bit like too rigid for me, but it was like a wonderful introduction, and it also gave me like a lot of great historical context and introduced me to like Zen koans and stuff like that. So it really kind of piqued my interest, and I was kind of off and on with it for years. But I kind of got back into it as sort of like a survival mechanism. Like I was working in this just god awful place. And my anxiety levels were just through the roof, and like I just needed to do this to get through the day. Like I remember I would do like a loving kindness meditation, and I had a reminder on my phone to go off like every couple hours or so, and I would just like look up and like wish whoever was in my field of view like some love and kindness, and like 9 times out of 10 it was like the fucking tyrannical CEO of this company. But like I wish that motherfucker love and kindness every time it came up. But like it got me through. And then for like a couple years after that, I ping ponged between like traditional more seated meditations and doing different things like breath work, and like even more tactical things like breath work that's supposed to create different responses in the parasympathetic nervous system. And I kind of like chalk that up as like, this is a mindfulness practice, but I've come back to like, no, that's really not a mindfulness practice. Like you're sitting there actively doing something. And now I'm back to really just like sitting down for 10-15 minutes, observing the breath, nothing else. Like it's like watching fish swimming around in an aquarium in terms of thoughts pop up in my head. The fish swims into view, it swims out of view, like I'm really just sitting there and trying to get the quality of experience in that moment. But like I know that you've done some mindfulness retreats and stuff like that. Like I'm nowhere near like as practiced as you guys are at this stuff, but like it is a cornerstone of what I do on a daily basis. And I think it's an important part of my ecology of practices. And it's like the number one thing that if I'm dealing with anybody in a coaching standpoint, I shouldn't say number one thing, but it's like one of the first levers we're going to pull if I'm coaching you.
Oh, wow. Mindfulness is one of the first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about not coaching you explicitly in jiu-jitsu. Like if we're doing performance coaching, like that's one of the first things we're going to talk about, other than like how your day is structured, time management, stuff like that. We're immediately going to go to like, what's the quality of your mind, essentially.
Right. I think a lot of athletes will say something like, hey, running is my meditation, or jiu-jitsu is my meditation.
Yeah.
I go to class, I do some sparring, and I'm not thinking, I'm just in it. What would you say to those people who are wondering,
Yeah.
is that my flow?
Yeah. It's totally different. Like, you might lose the illusion of self when you're doing those things, but the point is that you're doing something when you're doing all those things. Like you said it yourself, athletes, and it's not exclusive to athletes, it's pretty much exclusive to anybody who lives in Western countries. Like we're obsessed with doing, we're obsessed with producing, we're obsessed with consuming. It's sort of like an act of rebellion to do nothing, even for like 10 to 15 minutes. And look, like I say this, like I'm a capitalist, like I run a small business. I run 2 small businesses. But you got to have yin and yang, and we do constantly. You have to like devote some time to not doing. And it's only by not doing that you're going to realize or appreciate the quality of your mind, of your existence,
Totally. That's such a great way to put it. It's like we're doing things all day long, and if we can just spare 5 minutes to not do
Yeah.
just a little bit of break to help us see more clearly, it's very beneficial. I can go
And
on and on
look,
about
5
meditation.
minutes is perfect. 5 minutes is better than 0.
Yeah, I went to my recent meditation retreat on day 2. I think he said the teacher was like, after all these years, I think the biggest lesson I've learned is that the most helpful thing for me has just been lowering the bar. Like he just had a kid not that long ago, and he's like, if I could just get a few breaths in a day,
Yep.
that's the bar. I'm happy. I passed today, and just keep showing up each day with a very low bar, and it's the consistency that matters. Yeah. How about Stoicism and Stoic philosophy? I know your BJJ Meditations, a lot of the episodes on that podcast is a lot of these reflections, and there's a lot of Stoic philosophy kind of weaved in there. I'm not super well read on Stoicism, but for those listening, and myself, could you give us a primer on some basic Stoicism, and then maybe a few ways you see it woven in this martial art?
Yeah, sure. So, um, I guess like the short and sweet version of like what is stoicism is stoicism is like the internalization of Socrates. So pretend you've got Socrates in your brain, and every time you think or feel something, Socrates is just going, really, 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 you know. And that's it. You know, you're just constantly questioning the veracity of what you're seeing, or like pursuing fresh angles. You know, you're engaged in this process of interrogation with the quality of your existence, or the quality of your thoughts, or the quality of your experiences. Um, and eventually you realize that most of the time, you know, you're being emotional, or you're overreacting, or, um, and I think it's a wonderful tool, and it's one I use. It's one I use a lot, but I think that it also gives supremacy to logic. Like there's certain, and this is something like I've only come to realize in the last like 2 years of like working with like a really good therapist, is like you just can't outthink some things. You know, you just have to feel the shitty thing, and if you really sit with it and watch it, it changes. It becomes something else entirely, or like it just goes away. It's that fish that swims out of view. So I think these are two very good levers to pull, but I think we need to be skilled at pulling both of them. But you know, I think that the beauty of Stoicism is that it's I don't know if either of you guys ever seen the Civil War documentary that Ken Burns made, but there's this wonderful scene where he's talking about General Ulysses S. Grant, and he says like one of the great qualities of Grant was that he had what they called like 4 o'clock in the morning courage. Like you could wake him up at 4 o'clock in the morning and say, General, you know, the rebels just turned your flank, and he would just like, he would obviously be like startled by that, but he wouldn't be so paralyzed by the emotional uh energy of that he wouldn't act. Like he would be cool and level headed, and he might be like freaking the fuck out on the inside, but he could act under pressure. And you know, I think that's especially like in my white belt days and blue belt days, where you're just like buried under mount, or like somebody's just smashing your face with like a really heavy side control. uh you really get skilled at being stoic about it, you know, and just riding it out and knowing that this is making me stronger ultimately. Like, yeah, I'm suffering right now. This sucks, but this too shall pass. And eventually I'm going to come out on the other side of this stronger for my effort. So I think both of these things have their place, but I'm only recently coming to the realization that like you got to have the mindfulness aspect along with the stoicism, because stoicism kind of oversteers in giving capability or power to like the rational forebrain, which you know is wonderful for so many things, but it does have its limitations too.
Yeah, there's almost like a yin and yang quality of it. And when we're suffering or feeling something unpleasant, there is first, I guess, the clarity of noticing what is happening, like being on bottom out, noticing what's
Yeah,
happening, noticing the sensations, notice them, how they change as I change. And then two is like, I don't know if that's the thinking part, but then responding skillfully of like, where am I going to go next?
yeah,
Yeah.
responding skillfully and sort of dispassionately. You know, that's, I think that's where the stoicism can really help you. um but yeah, you know, like emotions, feelings, physical sensations, like they're sticky, and the more you engage with them, kind of the more they stick to you. Like oh man, it really sucks to be on this spot on this mountain. You're just thinking about how much it sucks. And like, it's just getting worse and worse and worse. It's like you're trying to push that beach ball underwater. And every time you try and push it under the water just gets like more and more turbulent. Like you'd be better off just like embracing the suck, as they say.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that mindfulness and the accepting of the moment kind of has helped me a lot in those bad positions. But I'm wondering if sometimes I do it too much, where I just find myself stuck in defensive cycles. Like I escape mountain and someone's got my back,
Yeah.
and I escape back and I'm bottom side. Just maybe accepting it a little too much of like, oh, I could just wait here until there's an opening, and then I'll like try to like take advantage of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wonder if there's like a balance there, or what your thoughts are.
There certainly is. And like, I'm still trying to find the right balance. Like I went to Boston for like a work trip, and we were doing like a client engagement. We were actually showing them some jujitsu, and I had the pleasure of training with the owner of the school. And, you know, that's exactly what you're describing right now. He noticed that in me and he called it out. And he was like, look, you're being very chill. You're being very receptive. And some of that was like, I was just being deferential. And some of that also was just, had like 4 hours of sleep and just wasn't feeling like particularly fiery. But he flat out said, like, you need some more fuck you energy here. And like, he taught me some escapes from side control and mount that are technical manifestations of that principle. So like, it's a beautiful sort of almost like kipping style escape where, actually it's not really a kipping style escape, but you're escaping mount and you're doing it in such a way where you're engaging your whole core and like sitting up hard. It's like, no, you know, that physical movement just makes you say no as you're doing it, you know? And it was really powerful. It was really transformative. But yeah, I'm constantly trying to walk that line. I think anybody who's a serious martial artist like is, or a conscious martial artist.
Right. I think that's where my personality of being too nice definitely comes out on the mats, of just accepting things. And I'm not like, no, I'm just like, maybe if I go over here instead, we'll see what happens. I do want to switch gears a little bit. And so your episode on BJJ mental models about finding your why and intention was really impactful to me. It made me revisit a lot about my why and how much it's already changed in the last year of beginning jujitsu to now a year and a half in. And my why has changed a lot more to like getting to learn and understand myself more deeply on this pursuit of mastery while becoming more healthy, strong, getting better at learning and things like that. But I'm curious, where does, I know you just finished Miami Open. Where does competition play a role in your why and intent in jiu-jitsu, and especially as a father now, and coming back to competition?
Yeah. So I want to win. Like, let's, put that right out front. Like I want to win. I like winning. Feels good. And it's more than just like getting the gold star. It's, I want my jujitsu to be at that level of quality where it can beat some of the best. But like, it's hard. Black belt level competition's hard because you make the tiniest little mistake and it gets exploited and you lose. The guy I just lost to in Miami, like I never pay much attention to degrees, but my wife was there and it was actually the first time she's seen me compete in a long time. She's like, oh, that guy's got 3 stripes on his belt. What does that mean? And I'm like, oh, he's a 3rd degree black belt. So he's been a black belt for 10 years. I'm like, I've been a black belt for less than a year. I've been training jujitsu for 9 years. So yeah, this guy should whoop my ass like 9 times out of 10, like unless he's violently ill or something like that. So like, I all that is a long preamble to say like it's a long road, and it's gonna be a while before I can achieve what I want to achieve. And part of it is I'm playing the long game. Like I'm just gonna try and outage everybody, and if it takes me until I'm 85 to win like World Masters, then so be it, But that's my goal. But really, that's secondary to just showing my son and the students that I walk the talk. Like, there is no better way to learn in this sport than to lay it on the line. You can get a 5-minute match and it's going to reveal to you deficiencies that would take 5 years of training with the same 12 or 20 people that you usually train with, because you all know what each other does and you all kind of like play your same game, and the hierarchy kind of stays consistent. Or you can go and just try and fight a total stranger, and he or she is going to do something that you totally didn't anticipate, or they're going to have a set of skills that you've never encountered before, and it's going to reveal things to you that just would have remained in the dark otherwise. And that's really what this is all about. It's about like becoming, you're not a finished product. You get that black belt, it doesn't end. It's about this process of constantly becoming. And the most expedient way to be about that process of becoming is to test yourself in competition, I think. Now, that being said, I don't think competition is for everyone. Like some people just have a very hard time with it for various reasons. I think it's something that like you need to be called to. But if you truly are somebody who is called to like the martial path or the martial way, and somebody who like values learning above all else, like there's just no better way to do it, in my opinion.
Yeah. Um, I want to ask about like your first competition, but I also want to ask about this recent one since it's probably quite fresh. What did you do differently in this training camp, and what did you learn about yourself in the process?
I had to just relax. I had to relax in this training camp, and I had to accept shit. Um, what I did differently this time was my wife got COVID and my son was sick too. Um, I was sick. I never tested positive for COVID, but I was sick for a while, and I missed what I arguably would be like the most important week of training. Um, and I just had to accept that. I had to accept that it's never going to be ideal. It's never going to be perfect, especially now that I'm a dad. And this is something that, again, Emily like really helped me with. Very early in Cormac's life, she could tell like I was just extremely tightly wound and rigid about how I was approaching things. And oddly, that was what prompted me to start my podcast, was a way of training this opening up, uh, of putting it into practice. But she said to me, like, you need to loosen up. You need to let go. Otherwise this kid's going to destroy you. You need to be more flexible essentially. And that was a big difference in this camp. The other big difference is that I've shifted my mindset and the way I prepare for competitions. I used to do like really intense camps, and now I'm taking a page out of my friend Colin's book, and it's just about being in a constant state of readiness. And what does that mean? It means that I'm training as much as my body will safely allow. I'm training with the intensity that my body will safely allow. And I'm very serious about my strength and conditioning work. I'm very serious about my recovery. But like, I know what the container is for what I can do, and I don't try to overfill it. And that's both in terms of what my physical capacity is, and also like the capacity to like give my family the attention and the love that they deserve. I'm not willing to compromise on that either. So that's really it. It's just radical acceptance was the big difference between this camp and previous camps.
Wow. Yeah, there's a lot of power in that flexibility. We're not machines. We're not robots. Like we sleep, like we might have a bad night of sleep, and if you stick to the schedule, injury risk can go up and etc. But yeah, how about your first competition? What was that experience like? And
It was
yeah,
crazy, dude. It was an in-house competition. I want to say it was like in Rahway or something, which is like a really like working class part of the state. And it was like 3 or 4 gyms that were there in this like fight club, essentially. I remember there being I remember there being a cage tucked in a corner. Um, and I got 2 matches. It was a blue belt. The first match was also against this guy named Joe, and I think I tried to hit him with a drop Sayanagi, and it didn't work. And I pulled him in a closed guard and arm barred him, and it was over like in 30 seconds. And I was like, I'm a fucking god. Like, I just felt like I'm a jujitsu god, like I just arm barred this guy in 30 seconds, like in-house tournament. And, like little did I know it meant nothing other than like it's a funny story to tell. And then I got another match with a guy who was like 2 weight classes up. At the time, I was maybe like 160 pounds soaking wet. And this guy was probably like 180, and he was like a 4-stripe blue belt, and I was a no stripe blue belt. Like I'd literally like just gotten my blue belt like a week before. And he dislocated he stacked me. I was trying to play spider guard against him. It's a big reason I don't play spider guard anymore. He stacked me and popped my floating rib. And like to this day, I have this rib that just like juts out of my rib cage, like from this very first comp. Wow. And it's like a cautionary tale. Like I see it every time I take my shirt off, and it's like, this is the hubris of youth. This is like what this gets you. And the people I train with, when I put them in side control, they tell me that they can feel it like poking them.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, it's never really healed right. So that was the gift I took away from that competition.
Then when you continued to compete, did that fear come back of fear of injury and things like that?
No, man, I was young and stupid. I didn't have any children. Like I was married for maybe like a year or two at that point. It's crazy. Like, are either of you guys parents?
Mm-mm.
No. Okay. So like, I vividly remember after I got married, I used to drive really fast, and I was driving home. I worked 4 to midnight at a newspaper, and I was driving home really late, and I was doing my usual like 95 miles an hour on the turnpike in the left lane. And I just had this realization of like, I can't die anymore. Like I'm, in some way responsible for like another person. And that was about as bad as it got, like, okay, I shouldn't do really stupid shit anymore. But then my son was born, and like he was born right after the pandemic, and I hadn't competed for like a year and a half because of that. And I was like, and this is part of that time period where I was super tense, and Emily told me to just like lighten up. I was going to do like a local comp, and it was like I was walking onto like a World War I battlefield. Like, oh, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. My little boy is, and this is not like, I'm being obviously like somewhat facetious here, but like it was an outsized reaction. So like now I feel like I'm back to baseline. I'm a bit more relaxed. I'm not like in mortal terror of like going out and competing, but like, I want to be able to pick up my son, like, and I think about that every time I go and train. Like I don't, this is a big reason, like I don't push things, like I don't push the line on foot locks. I don't push the line really on any sort of submissions, because like I want to go home and pick up my kid. And my kid's 30. He just went to his physical today, and he's 30 pounds. So like he's getting heavier. I'm going to need functioning shoulders to pick him up. And yeah, it registers more than it used to, for sure.
Yeah. I'm sure having a kid has changed your why a lot, but in general, how's your why changed from when you first started to now? And then, yeah, actually, I'll just pause there with that question. I'll have a follow-up.
Yeah. We could do like, I could honestly do like a 6-hour series, like just on that. I have a lot of ideas as to like why my why changed, and why the similar people have, or why people have like a similar pattern. But when I first came to jiu-jitsu, I was kind of lost. I was like, I had reached this peak in my career. I kind of had hit this ceiling, and it was kind of made clear to me that like, this is what you're going to do. We really need you to do this thing. And it was not like in a growth area of the industry. I had just gotten married, or I was about to get married. And there was just this deep rooted, like visceral pull of like, there is more to life than this. Like, I'm not just like this career guy, like there's more to life than this. And I found jiu-jitsu, and I found like my first breadcrumb on the trail of something more. And it got more and more clear to me, like what this thing was, like that really we were talking about a lot of things, but we were talking about meaning. Like it was giving my life like a whole new dimension of meaning via like self-actualization, via this process of becoming that I was talking about like earlier on the podcast. And I think historically a lot of this this itch was scratched by things like religion, but like religion is less of a thing in most people's lives now. But, I think rationality and science and everything, the scientific method, have given us a lot of great things. But I also think that when it comes to like movement practice and spiritual practice, like a lot of times the baby got thrown out with the bathwater here. And I really do think like that's a lot of the attraction to jujitsu is it puts you on this path that's pseudo, I don't want to say religious, but it is kind of spiritual. Like you are on this path of growth where it's like you're surrendering yourself to this higher power, which in this case is a martial art, and miraculous transformations are happening. So I really think that jujitsu is kind of like my gateway to more of like an examined life. And I think a lot of people feel that pull and maybe they can't articulate why. And I really think that's it, is it just forces you to reckon with, to literally grapple with other humans and to grapple with yourself and your values and this process of like being more than just flesh and bones on earth.
Right. Wow, super deep. Oh, I have so many follow-up questions, but we're running out of time. I do want to ask about performance coaching, peak performance coaching. What do you think is, and you mentioned a therapist, what do you think is the difference in working with these kinds of coaches, therapists, mentors, teachers? Can you put that all in context for us a bit and the work that you do as well?
Yeah. So I'll say this, like if you have like a mental health issue, there's no substitute for working with a mental health professional, and honestly, I think it's something, to me, I look at it as no different than like strength training. You need to go and put the reps in. And I realize that's coming from like a somewhat of a place of privilege, like, right? Like I have health insurance, I can afford to see a therapist. Not everybody can. And that is really unfortunate. But I think if you do have the ability to like avail yourself of that, that's great. But it does not, what I do and like what we do in terms of like Josh and Emily, that doesn't take the place of that. And also like your jujitsu coach most of the time probably is not well suited unless they're actually like a licensed mental health care professional. They're not your therapist, whether you say jujitsu is your therapy or not. Like it's two very different things. But really when like we're talking about optimization, we're talking about eliminating, I like to think of it as like sanding the hull of like a really beautiful ship. We're it's more like an exercise in taking away than it is in adding. We're looking at the things that create friction and we're trying to eliminate them. And those things could be, like we talked about earlier, it could be how you structure your day, how you spend your time, or it could be like more deeper performance related things, like deeper psychological issues. Maybe you don't have the conviction you need to succeed, or like maybe past performance is holding you back. Like these are the issues that like a really good performance coach can help you with. And again, like most of it, I'm dubious of like all these Instagram coaches that are out there who are like trying to sell you programs or trying to sell you journals or trying to sell you like, because really it is so unique to the individual. It really is just so much of what I do is just listening to people and really thinking and considering before I even like make a suggestion. And when I do make a suggestion, like it's an extremely light touch suggestion. And that's kind of, I think, what you should look for if you're looking to go that route. But it's very different from, say, a mental health care professional who is going to be familiar with your past and kind of your state of mind and look at these things through sort of like, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but like through a pathological lens. It's a very different approach.
Right. Do you have a favorite coaching moment or story or example that you can share?
Yeah, I can't say too much without like violating privacy, but there was this beautiful moment with someone where I'm working with where he realized that we're on the path together. I think that there's this real tendency among like coach trainee relationships where you look to the coach and the coach has all the answers. And I really try to avoid that at all costs. Sometimes to the point of like maybe downplaying myself or my abilities, but I really want people to understand that, like, I'm a work in progress too. You know, it really is about walking the path, and like a good coach is going to walk the path with you. They're not going to they're not going to be off to the side telling you what to do, and they're not going to be, I think, like 10,000 steps ahead of you kind of flaunting it or throwing it in your face. You know, they're going to be on your level. And it just felt amazing to see him acknowledge that, and for him it was just very important for him to feel that companionship and that camaraderie. And as soon as he realized that, it seemed like he had several like breakthroughs in his professional life, in addition to having some physical performance breakthroughs in terms of like his training regimen. So, you know, I think it was sort of like one of the first signals I've had that there's something to that approach that I'm taking.
Wow, that is beautiful. At the risk of sounding super corny, I'm going to quote Ram Dass, who says, "We're all just walking each other home."
Yeah,
And
I agree.
yeah, in some way, it was great to share this time with you, and in some ways, walk together for a little bit. I appreciate the advice and the wisdom. Are there any closing thoughts you want to end with? And then, if people want to learn more about you, say hi. Where should they go?
Yeah. So, closing thoughts. You know, I love Alan Watts, and I think like one of the things that Alan Watts would say if he were still alive is like, don't take me so seriously. You know, he was kind of this like prankster, this jokester. And, you know, don't take me so seriously, and don't take anyone with a microphone on the internet too seriously. You too can spend a couple $100 at Guitar Center and get this microphone and hook it up to your computer and launch a podcast. You know, look for the people who bring that level of sincerity to things, and look for the people that like you feel that magnetism for, you know, that communitas. Like as soon as you guys reached out to me, I was like, oh yeah, I want to fucking talk to these guys. You know, if you're looking for that sense of communitas, that sense of community, you know, you're in the right place. But yeah, if anyone's like trying to sell you booty bands or anything like that, you know, run the other way.
Oh man. Great.
As far as where you can find me, probably the easiest place to find me is BJJ Meditations on Instagram. You could also go to BJJ-Meditations.com. That's where kind of everything lives. Podcast is everywhere you listen to podcasts, and it's also on YouTube.
Awesome.
What about you
Thank
guys? Where can people find you?
Yeah, that's right. We're gonna be sharing this on yours. Yeah, the name of this podcast is so hard to find. It's 1-800-BJJ-Help with dashes like a phone number. So it's supposed to be a hotline.
I'm
but
not
if you
good at
just
naming
search
things.
No, it's just hard to search. I like the idea, but yeah, so it's a hotline. I normally call Jake and other people for help along my journey. It's a way to journalize this experience from the beginning. So yeah, just search 1-800-BJJ-Help anywhere you can find podcasts, and you'll see it there. Man, we didn't even get into bow hunting and how that might cross over with jiu-jitsu. It's something we all have in common.
Hey, if you want to do another episode on bow hunting, just call me. We'll make it happen.
Sounds good. We'll have to do a round two.
Do
But
both of you guys
everyone.
bow hunt, or just one of you?
We do both. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. All right, yeah, we'll have to do that.
Yeah, and like if there's any parallels and stuff like that, we'll just leave that as a little seed for next time. But thank you everyone for listening.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Great talking to you both. Thank you for listening to this collaboration with the folks at 1-800-BJJ-Help. I want to thank Jake and Josh for having me on the show, for asking such fantastic questions, and for hopefully laying what was the groundwork for a friendship and partnership in the future going forward. Had a tremendous time talking with both of them, and it was nice to just kind of sit back and answer questions as opposed to doing all of the talking for a change. Definitely check out 1-800-BJJ-Help. Definitely check out Less Impressed, More Involved BJJ and the Outlier community. That's a tremendous resource, and it's worth the dollars spent in terms of improving your game and improving the insights you can glean from your exploration of jiu-jitsu in general. As always, you know, gathering feedback for a potential event. This is something that Josh said he would actually like to participate in. potentially as a mindfulness facilitator. So definitely interested in that. But if you're interested in something to that effect, please email me at bjjmeditations@gmail.com. You can always email me there with any feedback, questions, comments, concerns about the show. You can go to the website, bjjmeditations.com. That's where you can book sessions with me if you want to do in-person or online coaching. You can make a donation to offset production costs of the show. You can read the essays that periodically underpin each episode, and you can sign up for any future developments via our email list. Finally, check out the highest levels on BJJ Mental Models Premium. That's the show that Emily Kwok and I do, exploring the principles and techniques that we use in our peak performance consultancy with Josh Waitskin. Also, if you're interested in sponsoring BJJ Meditations, particularly if you work for Show Your Roll or Kekwa Collective, two companies that I quite enjoy, please email me at bjjmeditations@gmail.com. You can always like, subscribe, review, and share the show wherever you're listening or watching. That's a great way to support. Follow all developments on Instagram, BJJ_meditations, and you can read some of my non-jiu-jitsu content over on Substack, johannon.substack.com. Finally, come train at Princeton Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. We welcome any and all academies, affiliates. Wear whatever gi you want, rash guard you want, as long as they're not stinky. Right now, we're offering a 47 challenge, what we're calling the 47 challenge. $70 gets you 4 classes and a free gi. Complete the challenge by completing 4 classes. We take $70 off your first month's membership. If you're looking to explore jiu-jitsu, that's a great place to start. If you know somebody in the central New Jersey area who's looking to explore jiu-jitsu, that's a great deal. As always, regardless of where you decide to train, try before you buy. Not every school is the same. Not every culture is a good fit for the student. So, see what works for you, feel out the instructor, feel out the students, and then make an informed decision. As always, thank you for listening to BJJ Meditations, and we will talk soon.